Comrades, it's a great honor to be with you again to celebrate this important day, and let me extend congratulations to the JVP on this occasion for organizing such a wonderful event, your youth cycling event, and then this really packed meeting in central London. So unlike a previous speaker, I like a lot of applause to punctuate the speech, so well done, give yourselves a round of applause. We're here, of course, on the 9th of October 2023 to celebrate Che Guevara. It is Che Day today for a reason, and it's a reason which typified the struggle of Che Guevara, but also typifies the world that we're speaking today, because Che Guevara was a man who gave his life to struggle for the interests of the masses of Latin America and the working people around the world. And he had many successes in his life. But his great ambition on this day had been to spread the revolution to Latin America, to the hundreds of millions of masses of Latin America who languished under neo-colonial rule, under regimes imposed by US imperialism upon the people of Latin America. Latin America, like Africa, Asia, should be a rich continent. The governments of those nations should be wealthy, like your own country, like Sri Lanka. The reason that there is poverty in those countries is not natural. It's not because of the talent of the people who live there. It's not inevitable. In fact, it's a great act of economic engineering. It's precisely because of the relationship between the so-called First World, the rich imperialist countries, who of course formerly were the major colonial countries. It's because they have an ongoing financial relationship with those countries which draws their wealth from those countries year after year, day after day. The wealth flows uphill from the masses towards the finance capitalists in their centers, London being one of them, Washington being another, Paris, Berlin. These countries are involved day after day and year after year in impoverishing the world's masses. Che Guevara fought against that on this day whilst trying to spread that revolution to the masses of Bolivia. He was unfortunately caught in a military action. He was tortured directly, actually under the supervision of the CIA, and put to death. So we are here to commemorate his martyrdom on this day, and that is why it is Che Day. But it's worse. Marx said, and he said it in his lifetime, that the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class, seek to turn revolutionary fighters of the masses after their death into harmless icons and peddle them back to the workers as a form of consolation. And Che Guevara, is beautiful to see so many t-shirts. I'm wearing one myself, Change the World. This was a t-shirt I've had maybe for 20 years, and I still am proud to wear it. But I see a lot of people who wear Che Guevara's t-shirt when I walk around the streets of London. I go out of my way to say hello to them, hoping they're going to know something about Che Guevara. And it's amazing to me how little they know, how often they know nothing about his great work, his great teaching, and his great life. And so perhaps you will indulge me if for a few minutes I tell you a few brief facts about his life to try and balance this. And we're trying to video this, and we'll try and spread it online to keep his message alive. So Che Guevara was born in the 14th of June 1928. And he was actually not from Cuba. He's associated with the Cuban Revolution, but he was an Argentinian medical student born in Buenos Aires. And it was actually due to his student travels in Latin America, well documented in movies and films, and this kind of a romantic story. His motorcycle diaries, he traveled from the Caribbean through Central and South America, and it was the incredible poverty of the masses he witnessed which really brought his indignation against the tyranny of the rule of US finance capital. You will be aware of the Monroe Doctrine, which in 1848 essentially said, the whole of the American hemisphere is the sphere of interest of USA. That was really a challenge to European imperialism. It was to kick Spain, in particular, out of America. The Spanish-American War happened. They took Cuba, they took the Philippines, but actually they expanded to occupy the hegemonic position, owning the businesses, industries, fruit companies, agricultural production of the whole of the hemisphere. That, they said, is their sphere of influence. And it was this that Che Guevara witnessed most directly. He actually went to help the progressive government of Jacob Arbenz, in Guatemala, an early socialist government. that was relentlessly victimized by sanctions and ultimately had a military intervention, was overthrown by the US imperialists in 1954. And it was there that he really turned to the revolutionary road, Che Guevara. And he said, he actually wrote to his mother, and his words we know now. He said, I swore, this is Che Guevara's words, not my words. No, I'd be proud to say them. I swore before a picture of our lamented comrade Stalin that I would not rest until I saw these capitalist octopuses overthrown. These capitalist octopuses were the United Fruit Company in the case of Guatemala. You know, they grew bananas, they grew tropical fruit, and such was the extent of their financial power and their land holding that they had the overall political sway in the entire country. And for the interest of a fruit company, the government was overthrown, the people were plunged into poverty. And this was a story that they saw again and again through the Americas. This was shortly after the July 26th of July movement, in which Fidel Castro had led progressive students from Cuba to attack and to storm the Moncada barracks. Fidel gave a very famous speech. I invite you to look it up. History will absolve me. It still reads very powerfully today, in which he said, you can try me. You can put me on trial for my crime of storming this barracks, but you never try the real criminals. You never try the finance capitalists. You never try the wealthy. A poor man who steals to eat will always go to jail. But the wealthy who constantly loot our states, who constantly loot our resources, who impoverishes the masses of the world, are respected. You, the judge, will go and have dinner with him after the trial. He occupies a place in the society. So I stand for the poor masses. Right is on my side, and history will absolve me. And I think we should clap that sentiment of Fidel. The Truman Doctrine after the World War II, of course, sought to expand the Monroe Doctrine to the whole of the world. You know, very recently there's a movie come out, I don't know if you've seen it, Oppenheimer. We should talk about the development of the nuclear weapon. But what's missing from that story is why they dropped the bomb. They dropped that bomb even though Japan was defeated on Hiroshima and then Nagasaki to send a message to the socialist camp and the masses of the world that we will use this bomb against you. It was to stop the Soviet Union becoming one of the allies who jointly occupied Japan, as had been their treaty commitment. It was to limit the power. And very quickly, you know, they switched. The USA switched their policy from being against the Nazis, against Germany, to really being against the Latin American masses, the people of the world, and particularly the Soviet Union and their socialist leadership. They wanted to make sure they kept their colonies, kept their financial domination, and that meant isolating the workers' movements and oppressed from the socialist camp. And Che Guevara precisely stood against that movement and against that trend, and that's why he still serves as an inspiration to the Latin American masses. When he met Che Guevara with Fidel in Mexico City, soon afterwards in 1954, Fidel had been released from prison 2 years after he was imprisoned. He went to Mexico and met with Che Guevara and other revolutionary students, and it was they who, on board the Granma ship, organized the introduction of their revolutionary force, you know, the M26-7, the movement of 26th of July, the date of the storming of the Moncada barracks was there. That's where they took their historical name from. And they landed, just 50, 60 of them, prepared for military conflict in the eastern part of Cuba. In the highlands, in the peasant area, and in the Sierra Maestra, and bit by bit they won over the peasantry. They increased their armies in conflict with the hated Batista regime, and they swept from east to west across Cuba, gradually gaining momentum over a 2-3 year period until on the 1st of January 1959 they triumphantly declared the victory of the revolution and flew the flag over Havana. And it was because Che Guevara, who had started as the doctor of that mission, but through his recognition of his leadership qualities, of his self-sacrificing spirit, had come to be, in fact, the leader of one of the major columns, I think 3 major columns of the army. He was, in fact, basically became a general, hence Comandante Che Guevara. And I think initially you'd wanted me to sing a song. Like, I don't know any songs about Che Guevara, but there are some beautiful songs. And if you've been to Cuba, as I have done, if you've met with members of the Communist Party or members of the masses, you'll know how greatly popular a figure Che Guevara remains, especially to the revolutionary youth of Cuba. And they do sing songs about him, and I can sing you only one line. And the first line is, De tu querides presencia, Comandante Guevara. And that Comandante is precisely because he became the Comandante, the commander of a wing of the army, and was a member of the ruling party that brought the revolution to Cuba and have changed the face of Cuba forever. I'm not going to talk at length about Cuba because the facts will be known to you. We hold every year, actually, a commemoration rally to celebrate the storming of the Moncada barracks, the victory of the Fatherland Liberation War in Korea, and next year we'll be celebrating the 20th anniversary of our own party, the CPGBML, the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. I invite you all to come and attend that meeting. It will be a historic meeting. But they've changed the lives of the people of Cuba. They've shown that you don't have to be, it's possible in the current situation, in the world we live in today, to liberate your country, to stay liberated, to use the wealth of your country, not to enrich the corporate finance capitalists, but to change the lives of your people, to build a better life for the people. This ultimately is what the earth should be here for. The great moral rectitude of our cause is precisely that. We have nothing. We are the great oppressed, but we are the great oppressed precisely because of a great historic act of robbery perpetrated upon us. It is absolutely our right and duty to reunite the masses of the world with the mass of the world's wealth, which we created and has been robbed from us, and that is what Che Guevara stood for. I'm going to invite you, I'm not going to go through it at length because I'm going to stop now really, but I'm going to invite you to look. There's a very beautiful speech. I'm going to post it online on our Twitter and on our Proletarian TV channel online. Comrade Che Guevara's 1964 speech. Of course, shortly after the Cuban Revolution came to power, the United States organized the counter-revolutionary Cubans who still live in Florida, who still live abroad, to try and overthrow the regime. You'll be aware that Fidel Castro had more attempts on his life than anyone else on history, that they used chemical warfare, biological warfare. They bombed planes. Very recently, there was an anniversary of a plane that was bombed as it was leaving from one Caribbean nation to another one, but a Cuban Airlines flight. So terrorism was perpetrated by the United States relentlessly against Cuba. Cuba had a right to defend itself. And you'll know that they organized something called Hermanos al Rescate, Brothers to the Rescue, so-called. Nice sounding name, but actually an organization of Gusano Cuban exiles, of counter-revolutionaries. If any of you have seen the film Scarface, they're in the kind of Scarface kind of mold. Okay, so these criminals they organized to try and invade Cuba in the Bay of Pigs invasion, Playa de Giron, yeah? That Bay of Pigs invasion in '61. That was totally foiled, but they never stopped trying to overthrow the Cuban government. For that reason, the Cubans, of course, made a historic deal to try and get weapons, including nuclear weapons, on their territory to defend themselves from the United States. And we know in 1962, then that led to the Cuban Missile Crisis, which again, I'm not going to go into at length, other than to note that US imperialism is constantly, in its bid to keep hold of its slaves, in its bid to keep hold of the masses of the world, toying with war, invading other countries, even as they are now in Ukraine, toying with the prospect of nuclear war, dragging us to the precipice of destruction all the time. Another great reason why the masses of the world must overthrow US imperialism. But Che Guevara, while he was one of the leaders of Cuba, spoke at the UN General Assembly in 1964. That speech is available, the transcript of the speech is available, and the video is available. It's a speech that I ask you to look up and just watch. There's a clip of it at least online, because he mentioned the dominant themes of our time, that he was against colonialism, against imperialism, and against neo-colonialism. That he said they stood with the non-aligned countries, with the masses of people of the third world who were the majority of humanity, but it was absolutely essential that these people broke with US imperialism, broke the relations that stopped them from developing, and just kept on being exporters of raw material to the imperialist heartlands, which would keep their subjection economically, which would mean they would continue to be colonies. And we can see that with the wave of revolutions happening across Central Africa at the moment, across the Sahel, that countries that were allegedly liberated and got independence in the 60s remain economically dependent and in servitude. And this is the relationship the United States seeks to retain with the world through its military interventions today. Che spoke out against that. He mentioned, in particular, that Cuba was an example that showed that the people were capable of liberating themselves. He actually gives a tour de force talking about the situation of Latin America, the situation of Africa, the situation even of Congo. Congo, where a war has been waging. Just recently, when he spoke, Patrice Lumumba had been overthrown and US puppets installed to keep the colonial wealth of Belgium in the hands of Belgium. And this was the repeated story of history. He talked about the struggle of the colonies of Portugal to liberate themselves. You'll know that some of their great leaders in Southwest Africa, in Rhodesia, in Namibia, in Angola, in Guinea. He talked about the Bay of Pigs, and he affirmed his faith as a Marxist Leninist, as someone who studied. And if you've read his book, and in particular, his book, as well as his book, The Motorcycle Diaries, he's known for his book on guerrilla warfare. And he's one of the great contributors of the tactics and struggle of people in struggle. And in his book on guerrilla warfare, he constantly emphasized, he talks about the struggle, about the tough times they went through, about the crisis that each of the people went through in trying to build their faith and stay with the revolution through difficult times. And he constantly emphasized the need for study. To have practical action, yes, everyone can understand the need for practical action, to take the wealth, to put it in the hands of the masses. But in having that practical action, you're met with concrete problems, concrete reverses. How do you retain mentally strong? How can you be sure of your cause? How can you be sure of the victory of your ultimate cause? And he constantly affirmed it was necessary to study. That actually every night after hard camp, after battle, he would regroup, make battle, and he would actually have study amongst his comrades who were fighting in the revolution, that they would read the works of Marx, read economics, read Lenin, read Stalin. For those who were illiterate, they taught them to read precisely as a means to build up their knowledge, to build up their understanding, to be capable of the heavy task that had fallen upon them. We in our party take that message very seriously. We are at the moment remain a small party. We are growing strongly, but we have a great liberating mission that falls to our lot. And as far as I'm concerned, our message of internationalism, the message of Che Guevara, that the masses of the world stood together against this mighty, hegemon of imperialism that seeks to keep us inflamed, says that we are all fighting on the same side. Che ended that message. He ended his message on that day, and I want to end mine with a cry. He said it was a cry that spoke for the whole continent of South America, that spoke against the interests of the imperialists and had the support of the masses of the whole world, and in particular, he said, of the masses of the third world and the socialist camp as it was at that time. And that message, he said, was patria o muerte, country or death. In meaning, we will have our freedom and the right to run things to the benefit of the great masses of humanity, and there will be no ending to our struggle until that day comes. Hasta la victoria, siempre, comrades.